church planter can walk 20 miles in a day. Give him a bicycle and he can go 3 times as far and be 3 times as effective. All right, welcome back to James chapter 3, and we want to start now in verse number 2, which is a verse that gives me a lot of relief, let me tell you. I hope it ministers the same relief to you as it does to me. James said, "For," which is because, "we all stumble in many ways." He's starting to introduce the topic of, what we say, and he had just warned about anyone becoming a teacher because they'll incur a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many ways. And that gives me pause for relief because none of us have reached perfection yet. But I love his word choice there, and I think it's very important to focus in on that word, particularly the word stumble in many ways. Stumbling, which we all do in many ways, implies unintentional error, unintentional mistake, okay? If you are walking along a sidewalk and you don't notice that the concrete is raised up on one section of it as you're walking along and you stumble, it was unintentional. You fall, but it wasn't, your fault for falling. It was the sidewalk's fault. However, if you keep walking that way every day, it would seem that, you could learn to watch out for that trip up that's coming your way. You learn from your experiences and you avoid stumbling in the future. And that is the secret to going on to perfection, okay? But then James goes on. Let's keep reading here in verse number 2. We all stumble many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. That reminds me of something we've already read in James's epistle. He introduced this topic way back in what we would call chapter 1, but we're in chapter 3 now. And this fits the entire theme of faith without works is dead, okay? He had said in James chapter 1 and verse number 26, if anyone thinks himself to be religious, or would you say spiritual, and yet does not bridle, there's the same verb this time, bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is worthless. Okay, so there's the faith without works theme. If you think you're spiritual, you think you're religious, but you don't bridle your tongue, you're fooling yourself. Your religion is useless. And so now he enters back into that theme, which he introduced now in chapter 3. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. There's that thing, bridle. Now, I love that verb bridle. You have to bridle your tongue, according to James, and you have to bridle your whole body. That also gives me relief because that reveals to me that my tongue as a Christian still needs bridled, and my body as a Christian still needs bridled. That implies that my tongue wants to say things it shouldn't say, that there's going to be that temptation there to say things that are not pleasing to God, and there's also going to be temptations to do things that are not according to the will of God. And this is contained in other scriptures as well. That Paul, writing to born-again believers, talked about how all of us has this war going on between our spirit and our flesh, okay? The flesh is the residue of that old nature that used to dominate us, okay? And now it's still hanging around, and we don't get delivered from it until, we evacuate the body. But here's what James said in verse number 2. If you can master the tongue, then you can master everything else, and anything else in your body that would want to do the wrong thing. Because the tongue, as he's going to go on to explain, is the toughest thing to do. All right, so, boy, if you want to work in an area, this is a good one for all of us to work on. This is a spiritual lesson for all of us, no matter where we're at in our spiritual walk. Listen to what's coming out of our mouths. And James is going to give us some help on that as we continue here. But first of all, he's going to elaborate a little bit on, this whole tongue issue. Let's just keep reading. All right, verse number 3. Now, if we put the bits into the horses' mouths so that they may obey us, we direct their entire body as well. And that's a pretty cool illustration there because we got the whole mouth thing going on again with the bridle in the around the horse and a bit in the horse's mouth, and you can control the whole horse if you can control that bit in the horse's mouth. What's the point? The point is a little thing, the bit, controlling a big thing, the horse. And then a second example that serves the same purpose, verse number 4 of James chapter 3, look at the ships also, though they are so great and driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. And so this is a typical Hebraic teaching method. You give two examples that make the same point, and both of these examples make that same point, that something very little can have a result that's much bigger than what you would expect from looking at that little thing. And, that's what James is going to say again here now in verse number 5. He makes his point. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. And here's the third example. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. That's a great example there because it's a really little thing. You drop one match, one little flame, a spark even, let's go smaller, and it can start an entire forest fire. All right? And James capitalizes on that great example even further. The tongue is a fire, the very world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body and sets on fire the course of our life and is set on fire by hell. Okay. I'm not totally sure I understand every little small point that James is making, but in that verse we've just read. But goodness, it makes everything else he said seem like an understatement. The little bit in the horse's mouth, the rudder on the ship. I mean, this is big stuff. The tongue is the world of iniquity. That is, the tongue is so wrapped up in all the world's evil. It's, it characterizes the world's evil, and it defiles our entire body and so forth. And we're out of time, so we'll have to talk about these big things the little tongue does when we get together next time. So I will see you next time. Thanks for joining me.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.